Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. We begin in the name of Allah, all praise and glory be to Allah. It's okay. I gotta keep my promise. I said 11:40. So we begin in the name of Allah Azza wa Jal, and His finest peace and blessings be upon His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Okay, after the necessity of prophethood and the incredible character of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we want to speak about the message of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in its capacity as one of the proofs for his authentic prophethood, that he was truly a prophet. How does his message do that? There's many ways to look at it. Of them is, the triad of truth. Plato, the famous philosopher, he argues that truth and beauty and goodness / justice, because justice is good, right? Those three are inseparable and in reality one and the same. So the truth is beautiful and justice is beautiful and justice is true. And that's very interesting because even in Arabic they understood this. It was second nature to them. The word haqq in Arabic means true, like correct. And it also means, haqq means the rights, like what is equitably theirs, the huquq, the rights of people, right? And also the haqq, al-haqqi jamal, like there's a beauty to truth, and there's something true deep down inside us about beauty being a good thing. Like what makes beauty a good thing? Think about it. Like why do human beings agree that the sunset deserves to be stared at, right? Or that paintings of the sunset should be purchased. Why, right? That's almost like a universal truth, that there's something pleasant about this, something, profound about this. And so from that perspective, the beauty and the purity and the justice that is so easily recognizable in the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam indicate its truth. Is that clear? And also, from another angle, I said there's multiple angles to look at this. The sophistication of the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like it's not just some philosophy like, I don't know, someone think of a cliche quickly. Pain is weakness leaving the body. Or, with difficulty comes ease. It's a Quranic, of course, mantra, but still, like, that's not what he brought. He brought this entire system that covers like theology and creed, to like civil laws, to international code, to marital life, to parenting, to financial dealings and business transactions, to spiritual, also enlightenment and, the actions of the heart and love and fear and hope and trust and all of this, right? And then in a way that is all cohesive, it all matches. That is something that so many people have also recognized as beyond human sophistication. No one has ever thought of this. No one has ever produced this. No civilization has ever produced this, not an individual, right? Like, if you are to compare and contrast with other legal systems, Islam passed the test of time and they were lost and gone and modified and forgotten, If you look at moral systems, again, if you are to look at also belief systems, many people, upon discovering the true teachings, the doctrines of biblical Christianity, have very big problem with it. It just doesn't sit right with them, So imagine now this doctrine matches with these laws and matches with this morality, matches with this spirituality, matches with this, virtue ethics, and all of it together passes the test of time and criticism. That is how his message proves the truth. There is something inherently superior about his message, alayhi salatu wassalam. The Islamic framing of Tawheed is actually the number one reason why people become Muslim. The Pew Research Forum They often note that Islam is the fastest growing religion in the United States, in Europe, in the world at large, and so on and so forth. They asked at times, what is it about Islam that causes it to rise among populations so swiftly, so rapidly? And the number one reason and the number two reason were, I read its texts and its beliefs make sense. And this is very much so related to what we touched in the khutbah yesterday, that Allah gave us this purity of fitrah, right? This purity of fitrah that is like a sense of readiness. It is like fertile soil, right? That once the revelation comes to us, say, yes, that one. It is, at times, it is indescribable. Like there are people that see the Muslim submission to God in practice, say, that's my religion. Like I know, I communicated once, over a decade ago, with a sister named Ashley, who was ordering like a copy of the Quran. She wanted to become Muslim and stuff. And I asked her, why did you become Muslim? She said, because I was watching a show on, what's the cable channel? On Showtime, HBO or something, called Sleeper Cell. You guys know what Sleeper Cell is, right? What is a sleeper cell? A sleeper cell is basically a hidden terrorist waiting for a signal to do his damage, right? So like apparently I went and I watched the trailer just to figure out what she was talking about. Sleeper Cell is like this series that was on at some point about some star cop who foils the plot of, you know, the Arab terrorists. Don't worry, there's probably some Somalis as well. You got in on it. Don't worry. We're not going to leave you out. So like some Arab, Somali, and every week he basically uncovers their plot and, you know, captures the bad guys and becomes a hero and so on and so forth. She said, this blows my mind. She said, when I saw the actor pretending to be Muslim, get put in the prison cell and pretend the Muslim prayer and put his face on the ground, I knew this religion was for me. I was like, yeah, subhanAllah. Like, it just, you know, the exact opposite of what they thought they were doing, right? Even though for sure this bad press does have its damage. But notice what chord that tawheed, whether tawheed meaning what we believe about God, how the Quran taught us to understand God on some level, the concept of God, or even the tawheed in terms of how we practice tawheed. That complete, pure submission, face on the ground is just one example of it, right? Pure submission to God. You know, people think, you know, the Quran is the number one proof for Islam, and they're right. But we may overlook what about the Quran. It's not like scientific miracles. I'll come back to that. I have a pet peeve of scientific miracles. We'll talk about it. Not categorically against them, but categorically against the misuse of them. But think about it. The Quran has been convincing people that Islam is the truth way before modern science. So it's not the science of the Quran. It is the tawheed of the Quran. The Quran describes the identity of God with such clarity and such potency, you know? It's so intuitive, it's so natural. Like, yes, 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 this is what I believe, right? And also so rational, it makes perfect sense. There's no confusion between God, quote unquote, the Father, for example, then the angel, who they'll, you know, this, well, we call him the Spirit as well, but he's an angel, he's a creature. And between the human being, right, which they call the Son, right? This confusion does not sit well with people. And that is why also, if you notice, that in the earliest years of Christianity, there was huge debates on the nature and identity and person of God. And the only way they were able to settle that debate was by the power of the state. Okay, that rhymes. So, in the 4th century, through, you may hear like the Council of Nicaea or Nicaea 325, they basically picked one of many doctrines and told everyone, put it down, this is the official belief. Because it was just so blurry, so obscure to them. And did not, and then of course when they settled on Trinitarian, the triune God, that also did not do very well. Over time, people continued to just drift away from it. And so that is the first aspect of his message you don't want to underestimate. It is the number one reason why people become Muslim, because of the purity of the message of Tawheed in Islam strikes such a deep chord with their fitrah that they are compelled to recognize it as the truth. And then there's faith in destiny. You know, Islam has a unique, someone got upset at my use of the word philosophy yesterday. But a unique framing, right? A unique explanation as to how God can be fully in charge, which is very important and very liberating, and people look for this. right? At the same time, I have a sense of accountability, a sense of agency. How do you reconcile that in a clear way and also in a non-contradictory way? Because it could seem to be contradictory. Absolutely. Qadar is a mystery. Islam's address of Qadar, the Quran's address of Qadar, does the best job for our limited minds to understand the balanced approach on destiny. And this is a huge facet of our faith, an extremely empowering one as well, that you don't have to carry the load all yourself. Things are ultimately in God's hands, but you need to really own up to whatever little bit of control Allah gave you, your agency, so you do your level best. Yeah, I don't know. There's just so much to say here, but like praying, fasting, healthy eating, the Islamic message in general. You know, like Salah. Let me just use the example of Salah. I gave you the story of Ashley Foss. That's her name. I don't think it's a secret. And how Salah moved her. You know, the Pope, the late Pope, Pope John Paul II of the Vatican, he used to actually publicly express his regret that we in Catholicism and Christianity have these magnificent cathedrals, but they are so empty compared to the Muslim prayer that wherever he is, he stops on a dime and prays his prayers, right? That there is something unique there. I remember once I was with a good friend of mine and colleague, Sheikh Ammar Al-Shukri, and we were like, it was after a conference and we took some brother out to a restaurant just to talk to him about Islam. He looked like he was very close. And so when we spoke to him, he said, I'm down with everything, but this Muslim prayer thing, that's a lot. 5 times a day. You Muslims pray 5 times a day. And Ammar, he gave him an excellent, I guess, cognitive shift, right? He said to him, we don't pray 5 times a day. The people who pray 5 times a day actually pray more than 5 times a day. And that is it. Like, just don't think about it. Just become Muslim and try. If that's your only obstacle, just try. And you will see yourself praying more than 5 times a day, just due to the value of what you get from the prayer. And that's just the prayer, right? The concept of the masjid requiring communal prayer on some level, right? At Jum'ah or Eid or otherwise. The sense of community that offers people, the sense of belonging that offers people. There is one of the many reasons. It's not just because the generations are becoming corrupt. One of the many reasons why there are always more elders in the masajid than youngsters, one of them is the sense of belonging, this standing together, foot in foot, shoulder by shoulder, doing the same thing, on the same mission, bowing to the same God. That is extremely therapeutic, right? Even on a social level. You know, the bonding that happens there. And the Quran says that. Allah Azza wa Jal said, we know, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that your chest tightens from all these things they're saying about you, all these slurs they throw out to you, all these accusations, the character assassination they do. We know it hurts. فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ. And so glorify your Lord, who is insulted more than anyone, right? Glorify your Lord, وَكُمْ مَعَ السَّاجِدِينَ, and be with those who prostrate. One of the 2 meanings is pray in congregation. It helps you mitigate your sadness and depression. One of the 2 meanings of kun ma'a sajidin. And then fasting. I mean, fasting is really amazing, and it is not just about feeling the pain of the poor. It is about so much, right? It is about using, the obsession with the body to give room for the soul to rise, the spirit to rise a little bit. And it's about creating self-restraint. And it's also about empathizing with those who cannot eat at meal times even if they wanted to. Some people say that it doesn't make sense that you Muslims fast to create self-restraint. I don't know if you ever heard that. Or maybe you heard it in a different way. Muslims say, I'm grumpy in Ramadan. Who gets grumpy in Ramadan? Raise your hands, you coffee addicts. Raise it. Right? They say, I don't get it. Like, it's supposed to give me good character, but it actually makes me irritable. Well, that is exactly the point. Fasting creates in you a tolerance for irritation. Long term, over the span of the month, you actually start being able to work past your irritations. The willpower to restrain yourself and stop being as easily triggered is of what fasting does for your cognitive muscles and your character. And so it's supposed to do that. It's by design that you are irritated when you first start fasting. That's how it heals you. No one said that fasting will improve your character within 35 seconds, right? It is about you are obligated to exemplify your best character in fasting, and you need to be fasting for a month. So read between the lines. And then healthy eating. I mean, there's so much. The Prophet ﷺ taught us so much about healthy eating. It is truly amazing that, you know, you see all these like health advices nowadays, and you guys know them better than me. I mean, you guys are the hipster capital of America. You're in California. But really, like, one of the biggest problems with eating in the modern world is that we eat on the move, isn't it? Like, mindless munching is one of the reasons why, you know, we snack too much, and we're not picky with, you know, the ingredients, and we're just on the move, right? The Prophet ﷺ actually taught us to sit down and we eat, right? Alayhi salatu wassalam. And he taught us many other things as well. I mean, he taught us not to grab 2 dates at a time, grab one when you're eating, for example, and so much more. And people always talk about like the ingredients in our food and how dangerous these ingredients are and these processed ingredients are. And I'm with you. I swear, I agree. But, you know, how much we eat is actually far more dangerous with how poor quality it is, the processed, commercialized foods that we eat, right? And so his guidance, alayhi salatu wasalam, was spot on. Even with regards to meat, it is extremely interesting that society has realized that meat is probably not as good for you to be eating it frequently as we first thought. So we need to cut back on red meats, right? That whole wave of cutting back on red meats. The Prophet ﷺ actually warned us against beef. Not haram. I mean, he did slaughter a cow on behalf of all of his wives in Hajj, and distributed the meat and otherwise, but he told us to hold back. He discouraged the eating of meat, and he encouraged of beef, and he encouraged the drinking of a cow's milk. He said, like, stay away from its meat and drink its milk, because its meat is a source of illness and its milk is he says they eat from every herb, so it is like a great source of so many different nutrients, I guess, and that is you know, a part of it. But also the fact that he did not say stay away from all meats is also part of his sunnah, part of his guidance. I'm not saying you can't be vegetarian for whatever particular reasons as a Muslim. You definitely shouldn't be a vegetarian because you think Allah is cruel, or a'udhu billah, that would not be a Muslim, right? But if you're just staying away for palate reasons or health reasons, customize something your doctor said to you, or you know your body, fine. But in general, across the board, he ate meat, alayhi salatu wasalam. It is unhealthy, actually, scientifically speaking, as far as we know nowadays, to go to the opposite extreme and cut off meat altogether. That's where the whole discussion of essential amino acids, which come from those proteins, that can't really be found in nuts the way they're found in meats. That's where it comes from. And so just the perfect balance on it all, being always ahead of the cutting edge science, is just so amazing. Intermittent fasting is just like, I find it almost funny how people nowadays are saying, you know, a long time ago they used to say snack often so that your metabolism doesn't slow down, because if it slows down, you're going to gain more weight. This is all kind of like washed away now. Now they're talking about, okay, so long as you like don't eat for, you know, 16 hours to 18 hours a day, a stretch, eat whatever you want almost in between. And that is exactly what we do. We fast like about 16 hours a day. And then some people say you should do this at least 2 days a week. And then you just smile when you think, like, guys, just become Muslim, man. Just stop complicating things. There's actually one nutritionist who said you should do it on a Monday, because you're likely to binge on weekends because your day is not as structured as the work week. It's just like the elephant in the room, right? Mondays and Thursdays. But it is not just what he taught us, alayhi salatu wasalam, it is what he prohibited us from. What's that? Who knows what that is? What is that? It is your rib cage just like that?
No. Rib cage and a heart mixture.
It's just, I think you guys would say something abstract and like philosophically profound and stuff. We're in California. Think deeper. She finally got the right comeback. I keep forgetting that I drove up 100 miles from San Francisco. Okay, Sacramento. This is where normal humans live, right? Bismillah. That's a Venus flytrap. Who knows what a Venus flytrap is, or how many people know what a Venus flytrap is? Venus flytraps are these plants that have these two plates that look like they have eyelashes at the end of them. People think they're monsters. They're not monsters. They're not monsters. And if you look at them from the right angle, they look like a heart. Okay? And when the fly goes inside, they actually close so slowly upon contact, the fly doesn't fly out. It's not like wham. No, they're not the jaws of the junkyard. So Venus flytraps can look like a heart. They look pretty. They look like eyelashes, so on and so forth. And then they trap flies, right? Okay. And so I just like the meme, I guess, or the graphic. One Muslim put together a very beautiful ayah onto this image, symbolic image, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah An-Nisa, وَيُرِيدُ الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الشَّهَوَاتِ أَن تَمِيلُوا مَيْلًا عَظِيمًا. Allah wishes to redeem you, and those who wish for you to follow their passions, or the passions, the human passions, they want you to digress into great deviation. In other words, many a times we ask, what does Allah want from us? Why are all these rules? What's up with all this haram? And it's not. It's just when life becomes, so haram, right? Like the dominant trends become so haram, a person feels restricted to not have unbridled access to haram. The halal is always more than the haram in principle. It's just one of the challenges of an age, when you live in an age or a time or a place when the haram is so much closer within reach. And the Quran speaks about this. It happens, right? Like, there's so many examples of it in human history that the Quran speaks about. When haram becomes easier as one of the challenges, sometimes the punishments of an age. Yes. Jazakallah khair. And so this ayah is saying, you're asking what Allah wants. Allah wants your best interests, and those who want shaitan, or whoever works for shaitan, right, knowingly or unknowingly, they want you just to give into your raw human animalistic desires, and as a result deviate greatly. So under the guise of love, under the guise of freedom, people will fornicate and people will drink alcohol, right? And if you get in their way, you are accused of restricting their freedoms. But do we not realize, every honest person should realize the devastation that happens as a result of extramarital sex, right? Having relationships outside of marriage. Sexually transmitted diseases are lowest in Muslim majority countries. Broken homes, people with single parent homes, the delinquency that comes from that fills up the jail systems, the ostracization, meaning the alienation, the marginalization, the curbing of the elderly and neglecting them because there's no more known families, right? If you don't know who your parent is, or one of the two parents, and they're not involved in your life, you will definitely not be connected to your grandparents. And that is why they die in this dejected state so many more times. It is an endless, ugly road, the road of zina. Alcohol is the same way. Alcohol is a poison that people drink, assuming that this is, a right of theirs. Hundreds of thousands of people die from alcohol-related traffic deaths alone. That's aside from battery, aside from violence, aside from date rape, aside from, fetal alcohol syndrome. The most preventable diseases in the world, a huge chunk of them are all alcohol-related. It touches every organ of the body, right? And you think of, subhanAllah, like just take a little bit of a deep dive on alcohol. What the Prophet ﷺ did there is beyond genius. It's beyond human genius. It is divine wisdom. Like, in this country, they tried to prohibit alcohol, if you're aware of the story, about 100 years ago, and they failed miserably. People refused, right, to surrender to the laws, and it went underground, so the society had no choice but to just accept it, under the duress of, public pressure. And, of course, the profit of the alcohol industries. I'll come to you, Sheikh. 1 second, John. And so they were unable, and we'll come back to it again, but the Prophet ﷺ was able to purge alcoholism from society. Even the most, powerful modern states are not able to. That's number one. And so they thought, how can we do a better job with mitigating the harm? They can't stop drinking alcohol, so how do we, lessen the damage? the apocalyptic damage basically that happens at the hands of alcohol. They tried to import the model. There was something called the Harvard Alcohol Project that brought in a model from Sweden, I believe. It's basically a designated driver concept. What's a designated driver?
Someone who doesn't drink.
When people go out drinking, go out partying, they have to pick one guy. Hopefully they're fair and they take turns, who has to say, okay, I'll be the loser tonight who doesn't drink, right? And so I can drive everyone home, right? That's the designated driver concept. That concept, of course, was not very successful, because who wants to be the guy who's not letting loose when everyone around them, peer pressure affects adults too, right, is letting loose. And so in 30 years now of normalizing, so much money was spent on promoting the designated driver project, and it still has not even mitigated, lessened half of the damage of traffic-related deaths, alcohol-related traffic deaths. And it's so interesting because the Prophet ﷺ actually said that as well. He said you should not sit at a table where alcohol is circulated. It's foolish, right? And then you have people talking about drinking responsibly. What does that even mean, drink responsibly? Like, I'm going to drink something that impairs my judgment until I have judged that I have drank enough, and so then I will stop. That doesn't sound very intelligent. And the Prophet ﷺ also said, anything that intoxicates in large amounts, then a small amount of it is haram, right? Small amount is prohibited. And so the detail and the amount of safeguards Allah knew we would need from getting sucked into this, slippery slope of alcoholism was only provided by the Prophet ﷺ. Whoever belittles it, whomever pushes back against it, whoever underestimates it, suffers so much, so much. Riba is a huge discussion that we don't have time to get into. The Prophet ﷺ, forbade riba. Like Judeo-Christian traditions also disliked riba in pre-modern times, and that got overturned for, historically speaking, for certain reasons. But only Islam is left, saying that riba is one of the worst sins in all of Islam, one of the greatest major sins, worse than zina, worse than drinking alcohol, right? Interest does not just, destroy people, it destroys nations. Nations never, those that are forced into interest-bearing loans from the World Bank or otherwise, they never climb out of their problems. They never develop. They always regress. They get worse. Look at Nigeria, look at Jamaica and the banana industry there. Look at any part of the world that is forced to take these loans. Because the riba is a satanic, exploitative concept, that someone who is stuck for money is going to have to take money and pay back more money. And the person that gives the money, the lender, has no risk whatsoever. So naturally, they will get all their money back every time, and they will suffer. Many a times, they will not be able to make the money back or pay it off, and they owe more anyway. And so the rich will always get richer, and the poor will always get poorer, and this will create all that it creates. Hatred in society, imploding of civilizations, tensions between classes, and so on and so forth. So these are the priceless prohibitions that our Prophet ﷺ brought to the world that are the perfect remedy, if you think about it, of some of the greatest ailments of today's life. Could one man do this? Could he have foreseen all of this? Could he know all of this? Alayhi salatu wassalam. The last one is science and medicine. And this is, perhaps the most overlooked contribution of the message of the Prophet ﷺ to the world, that he taught the world the importance of education. If you're interested in this subject, many of you probably know the famous names, right? Al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham, al-Khawarizmi, and father of algebra, and like Bayt al-Hikmah in Baghdad. And if you're really interested in this subject, there are many books, some more academic than others. Some books that are good for anyone is Firas al-Khatib's Lost Islamic History, which I have not gone through cover to cover. But a book that was life-changing for me was Abu Hassan al-Nadawi's, I read it in Arabic, I'm trying to think of the English name. The Rise and Fall of Islam, I think it's called. It's basically, in Arabic, it's ماذا خسر العالم بانحطاط المسلمين, what the world lost by the collapse of the Muslims, or the backwardness of the Muslims falling backwards. That is an amazing book. Those are for any reader that's interested in the subject. And it's important that all of us read up enough on this, because the backwardness of Muslim majority countries today makes it very hard to understand this point. That Islam moved us forward. Our golden age, unlike the Western European and the United States experience, the Western European in general, before even the US existed and grew, their experience was that they were held back by their religion. A man-made religion. A man from thousands of years ago made up a religion. So naturally speaking, it expired, right? It became obsolete. And so when they finally shook it off, right, that's when they were able to have their enlightenment and their progressiveness and move forward and advance. Our experience was the exact opposite. That it was our religious commitment and our religious teachings, the message of the Prophet ﷺ, that inspired and galvanized the Muslim civilization and spearheaded its golden age. Back when we took our religion religiously, seriously, and understood it correctly. That is our greatest period of strength. And so due to us not being in that state now, or generally in a state of weakness, it can cause a sense of doubt regarding our Islam. And that's why this subject is so important. And those two books are a good resource for you. If you're more of an academically inclined reader, there's probably no one better in the English language than Dr. Franz Rosenthal of Yale University. He writes so much on how Islam saved knowledge by deeming it sacred. How Islam rescued the world from the dogmas and the superstitions of the Dark Ages. Robert Bruffault also, in his book, The Making of Humanity, he says, and this is an important point, aside from the fact that Islam promoted science and all this, he says the debt of our science to that of the Arabs, he means Muslims, right? Because it was a Quranic civilization, so Arabic was central. The debt of our science to that of the Arabs does not consist of startling discoveries or revolutionary theories. Science owes a great deal more than that to the Arabs. It owes its own existence. Were it not for Muslim civilization, science itself, and wait, the Western civilizations would not have existed. We owe our existence to these teachings, he says. Roger Bacon. Who's Roger Bacon, guys? Hold on, let's just walk through this. The point is not for me to read. We all know you know English. Who's Roger Bacon? Come on, guys, gals. Who's Roger Bacon?
Resonance.
Again?
The resonance.
The Renaissance?
Resonance.
One of the ones that wrote the things like the early figures of the, like in the constitutional time? Before that?
The empirical, like
Yes.
empirical science.
Jazakallah khairan. He is known as the father of the scientific method. That science project your kids have to do, you know, hypothesis, experiment, observation, conclusion, right? Empirical studies, scientific studies. He is known as, in the Western world, the father of the scientific experiment. Listen, Robert Bruffault says, Roger Bacon was no more than one of the apostles of Muslim science and method to Christian Europe. He got that from the Muslim world. By the way, it's not like some theory. Roger Bacon's writings are filled with this. He is enamored with Al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham, rahimahullah. Rahimahullah. For those who say rahimahullah. Long story. Roger Bacon was no more than one of the apostles of Muslim science and method to Christian Europe. And he never wearied, he never grew tired of declaring that knowledge of Arabic and Arabic science was for his contemporaries the only way to true knowledge. Science is the most momentous contribution of Arab civilization to the modern world. That's it. So Franz Rosenthal, if you want more on this, and there are others, of course, like Maria Menokal, if I pronounce it correctly. She has a book called The Ornament of the World, Jawharatul Alam, which was the nickname of Al-Andalus, Muslim Spain. It was known as Jawharatul Alam, the ornament of the world. People would come just see, Al-Andalus, Muslim Spain, Cordoba, city in Muslim Spain, southern Spain, basically. And she writes about how, the Caliphal library in Cordoba, had 400,000 books at a time when you go to, the greatest, and that was one of 70 libraries in Cordoba at a time when you move over to Western or Northern Europe, and there were like 400 manuscripts in the city or in the library. So the disparity was staggering, right? That's another resource maybe you can avail yourself if you're interested in this subject. So Franz Rosenthal on Knowledge Triumphant and other books that he has on this subject, and Maria Menoucal on The Ornament of the World. Okay, this next subject here requires a break because I'm tired and so are you. Is the Prophet's accomplishments. I cannot really speak about the message without the accomplishments, and that's why I kept saying, look at the modern world, look what Islam offers, so on and so forth. But I want to just highlight a few specific accomplishments that made the Prophet ﷺ truly special and beyond material explanation. Like, you cannot explain how he could accomplish these things based on what we know of human beings and human history. There must have been divine intervention here. It is beyond human ability, these accomplishments. Yes, sir.
About Roger Bacon, was he along the lines of, I'm not sure if into philosophy sense or not, but was he along the lines of اللي هو realist, or مثلا was he like supportive of somebody like Thomas Kuhn, or Thomas Kuhn along the lines?
Not my niche. But the reason I said what I said is because philosophically speaking, Roger Bacon, like Ibn Sina, like others, they were not a matter of unanimous agreement. The acceptability of their writings in philosophy, and in existential philosophy in particular, how to understand existence, some scholars said that they went too far and they breached some of the constants or the definitive matters in the Quran and Sunnah. But listen, this is a good point that he's bringing up. Many people say, how do you talk about Muslim civilization and the golden age when you guys used to persecute these scientists? And they'll say, Ibn Sina, you guys called him a disbeliever. And Roger Bacon, some Muslim scholars excommunicated him. This is a common objection you get when you're citing these great personalities, right? That these people do not need to be Muslim for Islam to take credit for their contributions. In fact, we can quote non-Muslims altogether, like Musa ibn Maymun, like the famous Jewish philosopher and scientist Maimonides. He was not Muslim altogether. And still, Islamic teachings get credit for his intellectual contributions. Why? Because it was Islam's teachings that created the atmosphere that allowed them to work where they worked. The fact that we disagree with them on some theological issue, like a Muslim and a Jew obviously have theological differences, or some Muslims that went a philosophical route and we don't believe or don't accept how they explained God and reality and otherwise, but we agree with and accept their contributions, their discoveries, their writings and literature on science, that's an irrelevant issue. The fact that these experiments could happen, the fact that learning and intellectuality was promoted, science was criminalized in other parts of the world. Okay? Science is from the devil. If someone is sick, you don't seek medicine. You just, pray that God forgives them, because clearly they're either possessed or on their way to hell. That's why they're going through a sickness. It was all superstition, right? The Prophet ﷺ overturned these concepts in the world. He said, Tadawu ibadallah, seek medical treatment, O servants of God. He said, Allah has not sent down a disease except that He sent down for it a cure. Whoever knows it, knows it. And whoever doesn't, doesn't. I mean, just because you don't know it doesn't mean it is beyond human knowledge. Go learn. He said, Antum a'lam bi umuri dunyakum. You know better about the affairs of this world, meaning specialize in expertise and defer to experts. He said, alayhi salatu wasalam, Man tatabbaba wa lam yu'lam minhu tibbun fahuwa dhamin. Whoever practices medicine without being trained in medicine or being known to be trained in medicine, then he will be liable. It's not a hunch, it's not superstition, it's a science, right? So that's the idea, that Islamic teachings promoted this, regardless of what individuals may or may not have believed or done under that umbrella. So we can still take credit for it. Is my point. Is that fine? I didn't answer your question, but you reminded me of an important point. Khalas, we are going to, what time is Dhuhr?
1:30.
Excellent. So we're going to take a break till 12:30. If you want to ask questions, I don't mind. But everyone else, you have 10 minutes, and we'll resume at 12:30 sharp, inshallah ta'ala.
We can mute it for a minute, so we can do.
Oh.